Hello and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Didn't we vote to not have daylight savings time anymore? Didn't they pass a law last
We
year?
did,
Why are
we
we?
did. You
What happened?
guys,
What
you
happened?
guys have this Congress. We had provincial legislatures, provincial parliaments. All forget this. You guys have this Congress that you vote for every 2 years. Uh, all 435 representatives, a third of the Senate every 2 years, a whole bunch of other down ballot initiatives. Yes, this is right at 8 o'clock coming right at you. If you are in the United States of America, if you are a U.S. citizen, please do vote in the midterms tomorrow. They matter more than you think. Uh, Everyone else here and the rest of the human species will thank you for voting, for exercising your democratic rights, and for voting for everyone in your society, in our society, in the rest of the world. Joel, I know you might want to echo that.
Yes, and also support your local labor union.
Yes, that too, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, this week we do have a in-depth discussion. Is right. Glad to get the PSA out of the way because yes, it's important. But we got lots to get into. This week we've got our in-depth discussion. Is right. We got a classic Ion Canon deep dive. We're talking all about character continuity across media. What happens when a character transitions from screen to paper or vice versa. Also got a bit of Acolyte news that dropped today that we're going to dive into. But first, got to get the plugs in. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. You can also get all of our full episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'll probably end up getting to uploading those tomorrow because I got to go to bed because I'm exhausted because of that dang time change. So I'll find some time to upload those tomorrow to the Anchor, and that gets to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but also Tractor Beam, my weekly comic book reviews coming out usually every Fridays these days. Comics come out Wednesday. I read them, get to about around Friday night. This past week that'll be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This week we had or I guess what do you mean last week? Sorry. Bounty Hunters number 28 and a very historical Star Wars ongoing number 29. I won't tell you why, but also had part 2 of George Mann's insider short story called Tales of Enlightenment New Prospects. So yeah, check that out on Spotify and
I
Apple
actually have a
Podcasts.
question for you, Matthew. That might be slight spoilers for Bounty Hunters. So,
Yeah, go for it.
wee woo spoilers.
Yeah.
Was that the issue that had like a little brief history of Crimson Dawn? I saw a panel from it. It had Dryden Voss's big
No,
old mug on. Okay,
I
must be
don't
a future one.
recall that. No, but yeah. When that happens, I'll let you know. That could be that. I mean, I know there was something in Crimson Empire number 1. Not Crimson Empire. Is that what it's called? Am I blanking on you? Yeah.
Crimson Empire's Legends.
No, not Crimson Empire.
Crimson Rain?
Crimson Reign. Yeah, Reign Empire. Come on. Crimson Reign number 1 had a little bit of Maul training Kira. So maybe that. But yeah, when that comes up, sounds like something that could come up in Hidden Empire, which is just around the corner. So definitely check out my comic reviews for that. Of course, we're going to probably end up talking about, we are going to end up talking about Hidden Empire here on the main show. But yeah, otherwise, yes, check us out on the social media on Spotify and Apple Podcasts right here on the YouTube Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, or if you're watching on Twitch or Twitter. Thanks for joining us. Also, we got YouTube memberships. We've got super chats here on the Underworld channel, and another way to get in touch with us. I don't think the link at the bottom is accurate anymore because it expires.
I
But
changed it.
you
Actually,
changed it. Okay, never mind. It is accurate. It is accurate. The Discord, Star Wars Underworld Discord, where you can chat with Joel, you can chat with me, you can chat with the Ray side, Hannah Ray side, you can chat with everyone involved. Just say hi, hang out. We got lots of great conversations going on over there. All right, I've just spoken plenty. Joel, let me just get rid of this banner first. How was your week? And do you have something to say about a certain Saw Gerrera?
Yeah, my week of Star Wars got very interesting. It always sounds like it's gonna sound like a bad thing when I say that. No, it's actually a good thing. I got myself into a not a Twitter argument. I got myself in the middle of a very interesting Twitter thread about the one and only Saw Gerrera. I always like to pronounce it the way Cassian does because it sounds so cool. Sagura. Um, Sagura. Um, Basically, they just did a very long thread about Saw's character and kind of the arc he goes through. Mind if I read a little bit of it? I won't read the whole thing.
Read
I'm
away,
going to take
read
a look
away.
at it. So this is from Ka Cheek um at bland underscore username one. They have a really cool image of Slimore, big old
Yeah,
eyes
that was pretty
glaring
cool.
back at you.
And
Your
great
soul.
tag, bland username. There
I
we go.
know.
Take that, Elon Musk. Anyway.
I love their icons. Like it's Slimore just staring into my soul. Yikes. Um
Yeah.
Anywho, um, so they went on to say, one of the things I find so deeply engaging about the character of Saw Gerrera is that, in a phrase, he's right. Every episode of Andor, nearly every episode of Rebels, Rogue One, Fallen Order, vindicates him. In a metric sense, he's absolutely justified in his extremism. Rogue One, Bad Batch, Rebels show the absolute leviathan that Saw, and by extension the Rebel Alliance, stares down. While Mosma, this isn't Mosma slander, I promise, is cracking under it because she's in the belly of the beast. And in a big way, especially seeing what happens to people like Bix, what's right, what's fair, is unbridled violence. You look at the Empire and you think, that has to die. That has to feel pain, and that has to die so violently it can no longer possibly return. And again, he's vindicated in that too, as even after victory, the First Order reared its head. It wasn't scared to rise in the face of galactic liberal democracy. But part of what real good about Star Wars is that yes, the character is a big part of it, and he's bang on correct. But it isn't the way. Star Wars constantly shows that nothing is irredeemable, and you have to hope that you can spring a new world, galaxy to life. Let's see. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think that's kind of it. I just wanted to make sure I didn't get everything.
Yeah.
So I just kind of got into it with them. I mean, I didn't get into it with them. I just talked to them. We can't talk on Twitter, people. We can both agree. And I just found a lot of the conversation really interesting. We talked about like the New Republic. We talked about just Saw in general, his character. Really good thread. I probably should have put the link in the description. I didn't. Maybe later, if I remember. So overall, really interesting thread to a character who's been part of Star Wars since when was the Onderon arc?
2016. Oh no, the Underworld arc. You're right.
I know. You
Yeah.
kind of forget that Saw is a animated character first.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later. Since like 2011,
Yeah, around then, I
2012,
guess.
2011-ish. So yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting thread. Especially just talking about Andor and just kind of the story that thing is telling as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, Matt, if you had time to read it or just see a lot of the replies and discussions, conversations, always interesting debates going on in Star Wars where at least it's not a bunch of yelling. So that's the kind of stuff I'm here
That's
for.
true. Yeah, I mean, I caught, I guess, a little bit of what you read and a little more. I mean, there's always this thread in Star Wars to burn it all down. To even with the prequels, right? The Jedi and the Republic are corrupt. We got to burn them all down. Yeah, and then of course, I mean that's Anakin being Anakin, but also a lot of fans, and that's I'm going to get at fan perspectives on the Jedi and whatnot. One of the things we talk about a lot with the Rebels is there's a strain within the Rebel Alliance, and Saul represents it, even if he's more extreme than the Rebel Alliance. I've just got to burn it all down, not even with a thought towards what comes next. And I just thinking of that, and I think about Hamilton and my favorite character being the King George has a song "What Comes Next" or whatever. So you have like the real heroes in Star Wars. I mean, that's why Leia. It's so important that Leia is getting her due finally. It's like you keep saying, rightfully keep hammering that home, Joel, because she is one who is able to take down the Empire and also have a serious thought about what comes next. What are you building after that? Of course, Mon Mothma. That's a big reason why. We were on Doc's channel on Saturday. Videos uploaded recently. I guess it was uploaded on Sunday. Talking about Mon Mothma and why I want to see that story of the New Republic and what Mon Mothma is able to build. Great line that really sticks out to me, and I have Mark Thompson's voice in Aftermath Life Debt. This dialogue with Leia, Mon has with Leia about Leia being all, we're still on having this war footing, and Mon has to say, but we're building a government, and we see a little bit of that in Princess and the Scoundrel. But that's the thing with Mon Mothma. She's always carried that with her. It's so fascinating. I mean, and we'll get to the Andor conversation in a bit, but how there is a breaking point to that in the sense that she does have to leave. She does have to get on the Ghost and go to that meeting and publicly resign her Senate seat in front of the galaxy, putting a massive target on her back to say, this is over, this is done with. There is nothing redeemable about the Empire itself, but is there something redeemable about galaxy-wide institutions? And so that's my response to that. I don't know if you have any further thoughts there.
Actually, funny enough, 1138, another famous Twitter person.
Yeah. Well, there's the blogging website, right? 1138.
Yeah, that's the blogging website.
But they do great Twitter. Anyway, go for it.
They actually mentioned Leia in one of their replies. He said, "Great set about Saw. Personally, I think of this as the Luke-Leia axis. Luke couldn't bring himself to kill Vader, whereas Leia would have done it without a second thought. The thing about Star Wars is they're both right." I always found that. I just thought that was a very intriguing. I thought you brought up Leia, and like,
yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I would have agreed with that though. I don't know if Leia would have. Maybe. I mean, if we're talking about the way Leia is the Anakin and Luke is the Padme, maybe. I mean, she does order Vader's death. There's in the 2015 comic is a great moment. I remember that. She has Vader, like the rebels have Vader surrounded and fire away, fire now. Yeah, maybe, but I mean, I wonder if in the tense moment of father and daughter, would she still? I mean, it's possible.
But I think so. I think she's a lot more radical than we give her credit for.
It's possible. I don't know. I mean, and there's a reason why Luke is on the Death Star. Why it's Luke who has to go. It's Luke who is being Padme's son and saying there's still good in him, and that's the original tweet that nothing's irredeemable, right? So,
right.
There we go. Speaking of nothing being irredeemable, hey everyone on Twitter, glad to see you. Thanks, Hannah, for letting us know about that. Yeah, so
I forget that too. So, and I post it. So
yeah, there we go. So my week in Star Wars. I'll get back to the banners here. There are a few things from last week. Speaking of Hannah being on last week, great Tales of the Jedi discussion. After this, go back and check it out again, especially the conversation I think around Ahsoka and whether or not kind of erasing a queer character and that complicated conversation. That very, very glad and grateful for Hannah for giving her thoughts in her internal perspective there. There's a few things I wanted to add to that, and I guess first of all I want to talk about let's see if I can get her up here, slides here. We forgot to talk about this character. I mean, this is her High Republic guys, but great voice by oh shoot, Bryce Dallas Howard. Yeah, every week I forget. Anyway, great voice by Bryce Dallas Howard. It completely immersed me. I was worried about I'd be kicked out of what's this weird voice that has nothing to do with Yoda, and speaking in proper word order. But no, I was completely immersed. I was completely immersed in the story, and she did a great job. And it was a really moving death, a really moving scene, seeing what ends up happening with her. Dooku. I mean, here's the thing with Dooku. One of the things that James Luceno in Darth Plagueis established, maybe he established it, maybe others established it. To join the Sith, you have to commit an atrocity. You have to basically betray everything you used to believe was right, and you basically you have to deny that your commitment to the life of others that you used to hold, or maybe in case of Palpatine never held, you have to deny that is true. And and it doesn't matter who it is. It could be a youngling in the Jedi Council. It could be Council Room. It could be Yaddle. It could be whoever. So it was really fascinating seeing Dooku commit that atrocity in order to join the Sith and fully be Darth Tyrannus. So I did want to mention that that one. Another thing, going back to the Ahsoka conversation, and this is a wider thing about the way my concern about the way we talk about you know the paper versus screen conversation, if I can use a very problematic formulation there, but also it's also the Kanan Caleb Doom comic versus Bad Batch thing. I saw people saying, oh, this is so frustrating, annoying, this is out of continuity, and I saw other people being all, I don't see the problem, what's the problem, this is fine, this is great, whatever. And here's the thing is, whether or not you've read the story really does matter in your perspective. And it just does. And whether, if you haven't read the story, that matters in your perspective. Just talking past each other, there's just no real reconciliation, whatever the word is, to that debate. We're talking about just two subjective responses to art, to fiction. I think there's no real reason just to try and convince the other side that they're wrong in this case. And so I think we should just stop it. This is me being the Jon Stewart. I'm not a Jon Stewart centrist politically, but when it comes to this, I'm like, okay, if you've read the novel and you're disappointed by what happened with Tales of the Jedi, or if you're not because it was 6 years ago, okay, that's your perspective, that's your feeling about it. You're engaging fandom, you're engaging the conversation. If you haven't read the novel and you haven't read the Kanan comic and you love Tales of the Jedi and you love Bad Batch and it didn't affect you at all, great, you enjoyed Star Wars. Like, that's so, again, I want to be clear that's I think we gotta do better in just accepting people are going to have different subjective responses to things. I think a lot of it is bringing maybe subconscious or even conscious real world psychological stimuli into the conversation. I think, I've said this multiple times. I don't know if I've said it too much on Canon, but I've said this multiple times. What you believe about the Jedi in the prequel era has a whole heck of a lot to do with your relationship with Western Christianity. I'm convinced of that.
It's why I'm so excited for Acolyte. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, but even then, if you see them as you see the Jedi in the late Republic era as the shining heroes, then maybe you don't have a very nuanced perspective on Western Christianity. If you see them as I'm going to go on a limb here. This is just the way I think here. If you see them as the villains of the prequel trilogy, completely corrupt and lost in their ways, I think you also maybe don't have the most nuanced perspective. And maybe that's not true. I mean, that's not fair. I mean, part of what George Lucas is saying there is that they were corrupt and lost in their ways. I won't deny that. I want to move towards more nuance about all this, about that discussion specifically, and about every discussion. I think there is a nuance to talk about paper versus screen when things go awry, right? I think there is a possibility. I just wonder if people need to just take a chill pill sometimes, just stop and consider what another person is saying or thinking, or I mean, even me, I need to stop and consider why someone might believe the Jedi are the villains of the prequel trilogy, and to what extent are they right. And I can wear this prequels t-shirt, and that's part of the thing I love about the prequels, part of the thing I love about the High Republic, part of the thing I think the Acolyte is going to get to exploring a little bit.
Can I expand on that when because I actually think you brought up a great point.
Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead for your point. I'll
well, I was going to say is, I think phase 2,
mm-hmm.
something, at least Path of Deceit, and we know something bad happened on Dalna that we don't fully know yet. The path of destruction, not path of destruction. Well, I keep on. I have too much stuff going on in my brain. The next path of young adult novel in phase 2 is going to go into that. Something about with how the path of the open hand, they have something going on there that's actually beautiful and right, and that the Jedi squelch. I think that's going to be part of that story. It's on a smaller scale, and so that mitigates things a little bit. But I mean, Dooku, when you talk about when he's on Raxus, and again, shout out to Hannah, she has a great video about this. All about Raxus and everything there. But how Dooku has a bit of it. See, looks at that guard and says, "You have a point. They are these agent. Dooku's whole. I mean, we talked about this last week. How Dooku's whole perspective of the Jedi has this kernel of truth in it that Palpatine completely abuses and manipulates and twists into Dooku becoming the very thing he swore to destroy. Anakin becoming the very thing he swore to destroy. Okay, one last thing, and then we can actually, Joel, go ahead, pick up what you wanted to say there, and I'll have my one last fun thing.
We were talking about nuanced opinions and points of view, and this is actually something to go back to Saw and like why people say Saw is right. Something I've always found interesting, and I bet, and I'm probably sure it wasn't intentional at first, but it's becoming probably intentional in terms of like the two big leaders. Saw Gerrera is played by a black man, and Mon Mothma is a white woman. And if you are a upper class white woman who got it, even though women still have their, I mean, obviously oppression beats different times too, but it's like, you're an upper class white woman, your perspective is going to be very different compared to a in poverty probably person of color. And someone's like saying like, I'm a pacifist, I don't believe in violence. Like, yeah, if you're a white dude, middle class white dude like us, we're allowed to have that. We're allowed to have that opinion because we're privileged. But if like you're a person of color living in the urban areas where the cops are all gonna just take and do the thing because you looked at them the wrong way,
they can lean their kneel on your neck and kill you.
Exactly. Like I think I'm gonna see the world a little bit more extreme too. And it's like, I think we're gonna be a little bit more put a knife in the system and more not just be strategically passive about it. So, and that's another reason why I'm excited for Acolyte, because it's going to be show run by a LGBTQ woman, and a lot of the LGBTQ centric shows that I've watched over the last few years, a lot of their antagonists are always allegories for Christian extremism, or just the church in general. So I think that's also in terms of like I'm just getting to the thing we always talk about, which is Star Wars needs to have different writers writing it beyond just middle-aged white dudes from Gen X. So I think that's also important when it comes to points of view and looking at discussion of like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil and stuff like that. Like, also look at the lives being lived, and we can only go so far about it because again, we're both of us, we're middle class white dudes. We can only go so far in our.
And I mean, the last number of years I've been paid by. I shouldn't be crass about that. I've worked for Western Christian institutions, even currently right now, as the case. So yeah, that's an excellent point, especially about Saw. I mean, again, 2020, hearing the great outcry that America is not for me on the part of the African American community, the Black American community, after seeing what happened to George Floyd. And so, again, that's a great point. I feel kind of bad shifting from something sublime and serious to something kind of silly, fun, and ridiculous.
Awkward transition.
Joel, remember, I don't know what, May 20th something, we went to the Lego store at downtown Disneyland. And we came up to the UCS gunship box. There's no way I'm fitting that on my suitcase. There's no way I'm getting that thing home. There's no way.
No way I'm carrying it the whole day with you.
Yeah, there's no way I'm carrying it the whole day. There's no way I'm paying for shipping or anything like that. So I got out my phone, you're right there, standing right next to you. And I'm like, okay, Lego.ca, ordering this through Lego.ca with Canadian dollars from wherever the warehouse is here in the Toronto area. Got it shipped to my home. I still counted it as part of my celebration purchase. Anyways, I went on a big rush from like mid-August until kind of mid-October, I guess it would have been. Trying to finish the thing, it broke down a little bit and on me. I sweat, I probably bled. But anyway, I cheated yesterday with a little white clear adhesive that you'll never ever see. It's removable. It's masking. It's Scotch tape. It's not glue. Don't worry. You'll never ever see it, but it just kept the thing in together, so I could just get the thing in. And I finished the UCS Gunship, the Ultimate Collector series from Lego, and I'm very happy with it. It's I will bring it down here. It is about the size of my monitor. It like if I held it right here, it would not fit in the camera.
Let me see if I can put some pictures from the Discord you sent us.
I'll definitely post them on Instagram tomorrow. But it really, really fantastic, really beautiful model. There we go. It's hard to tell from your phone there, Joel, but it's massive. It's epic. It took me a long time. It took me some sweat and some tears and frustration. I actually did it. So around the survivors, a perimeter create to the forward command center take me. Lego. Anyway,
I love those gunships. Those gunships were so cool to play with. In every game they ever were in. So I love those gunships. It's such a great model.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, one last little two little bits of front matter still to get through. We've mentioned this already bit with Andor. Episode 9 dropped. I'll say a few things. You talk about Mon Mothma and talk about how she's breaking into the pressure. She even has to get this Chandrilan thug mob boss to give her a loan. I wonder if that's part of the story there, that she has to make these compromises, and that's part of what breaks her, saying, no, I'm not going to make any more of these compromises. I'll try and help burn the system, burn it all down, in order to clear my own conscience, as well as to build the galaxy. But that interaction with Val was the most interesting, because it does show that difference a little bit. How Mon, she's in the cage, and everyone understands. Everyone gets she's doing what she's doing. She's taken a vow to still serve in the Senate, serve the people of Chandrila and the people of Gorman and the people of whoever else. And Val is the one who's free to go off and burn it down, burn the Empire down. We talk. Yes, you're right. We talk about privilege and how that makes life easier. For Mon, it makes it harder. I think in some ways, in the sense of she is trapped. She is caught having to compromise her morals, her conscience, in order to do the lesser evil of staying in the Senate and doing what she can to support the rebellion from there. But it's only a matter of time. Also, again, I'm still wondering about structure. I'm still wondering 7, 8, 9, 10. When's this prison breakout actually going to happen? I don't know if I feel like they're dragging it on too long. Maybe they are a little bit. But I mean, at the end where Andy Serkis' character finally turns, they got Andy Serkis. No, okay, joke's over. Andy Serkis' character,
he was great.
Finally starts to help and crack, and it's sad to say, just like the kid who wrote the manifesto, I think this guy's going to eat it too, unfortunately. But he's going to have both the kid who wrote the manifesto, blank on his name, and Andy Serkis' character, blank on his name. They're going to be remembered as having a little small piece to play in the part that Andor ends up playing, which leads to the part that Luke ends up playing. And so it all builds together. It all builds on each other, just like they're building this little nonsense piece that we have no idea what it is. Alex Damon is right. We're probably not supposed to know, but it builds something that's nothing, that might be part of the Death Star. Who knows what? But all these characters are actually building towards the destruction of the Empire's grip. So what did you think of Andor episode 9?
Oh, it was great. I love hating on parents like go get a husband, get a husband,
Oh, that was
Vel.
hilarious.
Like
Not at the top of her list, not at the bottom of her list, nowhere on her list.
like yep, yeah. Yeah, I think his name is Keto. I want to say his name's
Yeah,
Keto.
yeah, something like that.
I love. I'm going to call him Andy Serkis' character. I love Andy Serkis' character. I love. Oh, I too am afraid he's probably not going to make it because, like, but Dad, he would have made a great leader for the rebellion. Like, he's got the skills.
Mhm,
He cares about the getting his men out, and then once he
mhm,
realized they're never getting out of there, I think he's going to finally take the skills of leadership and like put them to some good use of making that prison so
right.
ungovernable. Time to just, you know
Yeah,
what? We're not getting out of here. Time to just crack a few imperial skulls.
yeah.
Um,
He's gonna
also,
British colonize it. Like what
yeah.
the way the British colonies always, well, the British Empire just broke up because they realized it's just not worth it anyway.
Something a friend of mine yesterday during the last episode noticed, and this continues, is we're finally seeing the sadist of the empire. Like we've seen a lot of the bureaucrats, the officers. Now we're just seeing the people who enjoy torturing people for fun. It's like,
Mhm,
ooh, I get to torture today. I love my job. You know, it's like we're seeing those psychos.
mhm,
Like the doctor and like that really intense interrogation scene with Bix. It's like
mhm.
poor Bix. Just gosh,
Yeah.
it's terrible. Seeing some kind of seeing Deidre, you know, finally like now she has power, she's gonna use it and abuse it. And I guess I'm curious where Cyril's gonna go because I think he's gonna go do something crazy and psychotic. I think he's lost it, and I think he's like ready to finally just crack,
Mhm.
and not in a good way.
Not in a good way. I love that they went. That was, kind of. I mean, the She-Hulk ending. My jaw is still somewhere rolling around the floor. But that I was so surprised they just went for it with the toxic psychotic crush.
Mhm.
They didn't pull the punch there, and the pressure that Deidre is under. I mean, people are. She's trying to be taken seriously. Here's another feminist point. She's trying to be taken seriously in this security bureau, and all the dudes around her, except for maybe the director, the head honcho. But the other guy who's accusing her of overreach. And then you got Cyril, who's got this weird crush going on. Yeah, she's just trying to do her job, man.
And
I
torture
only work here.
Bix horribly.
Yeah, but her job happens to also be pretty cold and evil. But uh, yeah, it's really well written villain. Really, really happy about what they're
Mhm.
doing there. So, you have any more thoughts on Andor episode 9?
Nope, but I'm gonna put some. But I'm gonna put some money on it. Not really, because I don't want to spend any money. But
Yeah,
I say next week we get a prison break. I am
there
putting
we
it
go.
down on camera.
If anyone wants to do a super chat, now's the time. Do you think? Do a prison break anyway? I had to go for it. There we go.
Got
All right.
it on camera. We got it on recording.
Yeah, there we go. It's on recorded. If anyone wants to, I don't. That wouldn't really make sense. It's not really a bet. That's a donation, but whatever. Anyways, sticking with screen, we got some news. Actually, do I have this? Oh, I guess I don't have the breaking news thing anymore. Oh
And
no, I do. Here we go. Finally get to do
yay.
this. Finally get to use this. Just today. Here's a show, and Joel, I was talking to you about this just before. The Acolyte is I call we call Ion Canon, partly call it the home for the High Republic here at the Star Wars Underworld Network. And yes, I mean, sure, the flagship show is gonna focus on the Acolyte, gonna probably talk about this on Thursday as much as they can. But but I want to focus on this show the way the flagship show focuses on all the shows. Again, it's set in the High Republic. You get to that in a second. It hits all the notes about weird Sith dark side stuff that Joel loves, and the funky goofy space wizards that I love. And Joel, you're into the space wizards too, don't lie.
I love Space Wizard,
You love
man.
the space wizards, the good space wizards, the happy, peaceable space wizards. But anyway, we got some news to drop today from StarWars.com, saying coming out with first of all, just a little description, and then the cast. I'll get to the cast in a second. But so this is just from StarWars.com. I'll just read it out. The Acolyte is a mystery thriller that will take viewers into a galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic era. A former Padawan reunites with her Jedi Master to investigate a series of crimes, but the forces they confront are more sinister than they ever anticipated. The High Republic saw the Jedi Order at its prime, centuries prior to the events of Star Wars The Phantom Menace. And you can learn more about this here at StarWars.com's official hub for all things High Republic. There's a link. Anyway, from creator, showrunner, and executive producer Leslie Headland from Russian Doll, The Acolyte has begun production in the UK. The executive producers are Kathleen Kennedy, thank the maker, Simon Emanuel, Jeff F. King, and Jason McAuliffe. Rain Roberts and Damian Anderson are producing. Headland will also direct the series pilot. The Acolyte will stream exclusively on Disney Plus, and I don't quite know when, but I wish it were tomorrow. Got a bit of a comment here. First off, from Sam the Sham, friend of the pod, a long time viewer. I wonder if it will have the same thriller tone as Andor or more in the spirit of Mandalorian. That's interesting. Comparing with, I hadn't thought to compare it with the other shows, because my thought is it's going to be super different. It's going to be really going into the Force stuff, the dark side stuff. If there is a comparison, it's probably going to be like Ahsoka, but the dark side, and the the kind of meanderings and goings on. It kind of reminds me of the Phase 1 comic that explored the nameless, that thing. I forget. Oh, again, I'm blanking on the name of these comics, but it was I think it was an adult comic by Daniel Jose Older, that they had a Jedi investigator and a civilian investigator trying to trace down the nameless, and it kind of has that vibe to me. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the two. I'd say the thriller tone of Andor a little bit. I don't know, Joe, if you want to tackle this and then give us your thoughts on the description.
Well, no Dave Filoni, so you know it's gonna suck. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I just think Dave Filoni, the executive producer, as we all know, he makes everything that's good in 3 touches. Ding. I had to do that. No, I think I kind of see this as kind of maybe a bit of a more the Andor vibes of like a dark thriller. Like there's gonna be crime and drama and dark conspiracies, but with some obviously space wizards. The thing that caught me out of that press release, though, wasn't the High Republic. It was they call the person, I don't know who the main character is, a former Padawan, and to me that's an interesting wording because, like, okay, former Padawan. So what are you, Jedi Knight now? We call them Jedi Knights, or former Padawan, as in they were a Padawan like Ahsoka, and then they were like Jedi Order, you stink because of reasons. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I never got to be a master, so, or knight. Not even Anakin got to be a knight. But not a master. So it's like they are a former Padawan who left, and now their old master is still around, and then they do some mysterious investigating that leads to maybe like the Acolyte is like the person who's doing all the crime. That's like their code name, the Acolyte.
There we go. Yeah.
Like Fulcrum or something like that.
That's an interesting thought. Never thought of that. Yeah. Before I get into, I do want to show they did announce the cast here. Carrie Ann Moss is in Star Wars. The Matrix herself, Trinity herself, Carrie Ann Moss is in Star Wars. I'm gonna give myself a better view of this too.
Keanu Reeves is Revan almost there. I'm kidding.
Hey, why not? Yeah, pretty diverse cast here. A lot of this has already been announced, especially Amanda Stenberg. I feel like many since it was already also being announced. But yeah, pretty good looking cast. Again, Carrie Ann Moss. I'm pretty excited about that. But it looks, I mean, I think Amanda Stenberg, I think they're gonna really carry the show really well, really strongly. Leslie Headland's gonna make sure they do. Gonna put her stamp on this show. Leslie Headland is, and I'm excited for it. I will say, I gotta say, the thing that constantly sticks out to me, and Joel, I know you don't fully agree with this, but this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm loving. This is what I'm enjoying. it keeps mentioning High Republic, and in this in its marketing, I know that it even points to the High Republic thing on the website. Just if you want to learn more, check it out here. Um, I think that's weird. I think that's unusual. If I mean, I work in a marketing department now, and I've done communications and whatnot, and if you're trying to market this kind of weird off the side show, you tend to want to be more broad based in your messaging, in your appeal, and just say, this. Hey, look, it's a Star Wars show. It's going to be kind of cool, dark mystery thriller. Like the Andor thriller vibe. I mean, the way Andor and Mandalorian have this broader appeal. I mean, Andor, well, outside of Star Wars, Mandalorian broader appeal to original trilogy fans, but here they keep name dropping this this niche of a niche, this book publishing initiative, but also not. I mean, also the era of the High Republic that, frankly, not everyone knows about, not everyone knows exists. It is a bit of a curveball to that. I mean, though maybe this is directed for those of us in the know. I don't know, but I think, but the fact that they have the link there and say, if you want to know more, kind of like it reminds me of how what they have to do with Ahsoka in The Mandalorian and in a Book of Boba Fett, and now in her own show. If you want to know her origins, go watch this animated series. If you want to know what this High Republic era is, this is the thing. If it were Dave Filoni, if it were John Favreau, if it were Tony Gilroy, if it were whoever else, Joel, I'd be with you that it's going to have nothing at all to do with anything in paper. And I'm not saying this is formally part of the High Republic publishing initiative. We don't have like the High Republic banner in red or anything like that.
That'd
It
be cool,
is
though.
part of the era, the time. It says the final days of the High Republic. I'm not saying that this Padawan that's fallen, that's left, is Keith Trennis. I'm saying I would love it so much if Keith Trennis showed up. It's my dark horse pick. We'll get to Keith in a bit in the main topic when we get to that. But I mean, I've said this multiple times. We know Leslie Headland. We know she's paying attention. We know she has her eye on Canon. She would know who Mark Rowe is. If she saw our logo, she'd know exactly who that is. I can bet. And so, is this gonna be so strict in continuity? It's probably not going to contradict. It's probably going to be one of those kind of mostly in its lane. But again, the fact that it's mentioning it when nothing else on screen, nothing else to do with screen, is mentioning High Republic. It's being known to that. It's not being told, oh, this is so and so many centuries. It's not ignoring it and saying this is just so and so many centuries before Phantom Menace, without reference to High Republic, which it could have done. And so the fact that they mention, I think, is weird, Joel. I know you don't agree necessarily, but you know what I'm getting at.
Few things. One, are you not forgetting the amazingness? There's going to be Young Jedi Adventures coming up soon on Disney.
Oh yeah, sorry. That is full on the exception. You're right. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. And second off, they actually they do mention centuries. It's interesting they're not giving us a time frame in the actual canons of when you say Keith Trennis is going to show up, are we expecting Keith Trennis in his prime as we're reading the books, or are we going to see old man Keith Trennis just barely living because he's 102 because we're getting close to the Phantom Menace? I don't know how.
I guess I figure Jodie Turner-Smith. I guess she's too young to play old woman Keith Trennis. But anyway.
Oh, Keith Trennis is a woman. Sorry, old woman Keith Trennis. Barely hanging on because humans don't age or still age like normal humans, but old. Like how close are we to is by the end of seasons of Acolyte, are we gonna see little baby Sheev pop up and be born? No, Sam, I don't think there has been any confirmation of when exactly the High Republic. And I remember one press release saying it's at the tail end of the High Republic. So
so this is the end of the High Republic. I know that 200 years is phase 1 of the High Republic, is 200 years before Phantom Menace. So we don't know when the end is, but that's not too bad of a ballpark, but yeah,
So
it
yeah,
could be 100 years before Phantom Menace. Here's a question: how I mean, Dooku Jedi Lost is set after it's already calling it, looking back and calling it the High Republic. Again, not like the Acolyte is going to have too much to do with Dooku Jedi Lost, but anyway. Sorry,
I don't know
keep
if
going.
Duke would probably at least be a kid. Nah, I'd probably even be born yet if we're
No,
gonna.
I don't think he'd be born yet at this time.
Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's sort of like tail end. So like the way I sort of see it, the books are like tail, like they're smack dab in the middle of the High Republic. They're like High Republic in its
Well,
prime.
yeah, phase one for
Like
sure.
the Victorian era.
Mhm.
And, if like the end of the High Republic, you got maybe like Queen Victoria is still old, so like you got maybe so like a lot. Like my guess is that at least when they come to the human characters,
Mhm.
Elzar, Stellan, they're probably old or dead.
Well, Stellan's
Um,
definitely dead. We know that.
Stellan's dead.
Spoiler
Um,
alert.
maybe the alien characters can kind of live longer. The aliens live longer than humans just by naturally. Obviously, you got
Mhm.
Yoda, but that's kind of a given at this
Yeah.
point for anything. So, um, we don't know when the High Republic, I
No.
think, ends. I remember a Chinese book that was like excluded China said like 60 BBY,
Yeah.
but I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
that's right. That's a lot later. That's true. Yeah.
So I mean, who knows? The screen stuff could
Mhm.
change it. Who knows? Well, maybe they'll do it like Andor, and it's like opening with a date 60 BBY.
Yeah.
So if it's like starts that, then that's kind of like, well, then
Mhm.
most of those characters are probably dead because of old age, unless
Mhm.
they're like immortal or something, or just long lived like the alien creatures.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my kind of out
Mhm.
in terms of like how I don't think this connects to the books, and that I think it's just gonna be like, here's the High Republic books timeline,
Mhm.
and then
Uh,
High Republic's like right there.
Like
Um,
Yoda, like in Tales of the Jedi has Yoda saying 100,000 years before.
that's
But yeah,
true.
yeah.
But I
Mhm.
do wonder one thing I think I kind of would hope for is seeing that aesthetic of the High Republic translate onto screen. Like, are we gonna see Jedi in golden robes still? Are they slowly transitioning out of that? Are we gonna see kind of how technology in Star Wars doesn't really evolve that far? Are we gonna see more
Sure.
pristine ships and buildings and stuff like that? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the stuff I hope to see because like the aesthetic of the High Republic on
Mhm.
screen. 'Cause that'd be cool. See like a
Yeah.
golden robe Jedi.
Hannah has this thing, some loose concepted or loose concepts related to it. So, I mean, maybe a vector. Maybe not. I mean, we know the vector was originally designed to be the Arc 170, and then
Yeah.
in Revenge of the Sith, and that got
Pathfinders.
yeah,
Pathfinders.
Pathfinders, something like that. I mean, the thing is though, is that Phase 3. You talked about the robes, and to me, Phase 3 is all about how the Jedi got to. I mean, all of High Republic is about how the Jedi got to be where they are. I will fully admit that by the late Republic they are enclosed and very strict. I mean, Mace Windu demonstrates this in Tales of the Jedi. So yeah, I mean, so maybe this show will explore that too, and that's I mean something maybe I think you were alluding to before. One last thing to say, Hannah also has this comment, the Star Wars Twitter account saying, "Reading the books is helpful."
Mhm.
I
That'd be
mean,
cool.
it's helpful in lots of different ways. That's true, but I mean, it might again this and that link. I'm like, what's going on with that link? Now, here's what's going on, guys. Is Lucasfilm marketing knowing that folks like me are going to be all, what's going on with that link, and just want to keep talking about it, and you know, fueling the podcast terrariot with stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's definitely part of it, but
It's all about that timeline for me. It's all about that timeline. It's
yeah,
like, are we 60 BBY or are we smack dab in 200 BBY where when Eldar is still young and fresh and
and Stellan's still alive.
exactly,
Yeah.
or is it 60 BBY and all those characters are probably dead because
Spoiler alert, Stellan dies. But
yeah,
we won't go
well,
into that.
old age too was
Yeah.
Eldar unless you
I
want
won't
to.
go into how, but I've probably said too much. Anyway. Okay, so I'm super excited for this. This show is gonna get the regular treatment. I'm thinking about types of things I want to do, chat with Joel when this show comes out, whenever it comes out.
My
You
guess
know,
in a year or two, like not next year, but year after.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna put this out there right now. I'm gonna talk, throughout the Underworld network and see what we're doing about this, because I I want to spend a main topic every episode on this show. It's gonna bring up stuff. I already can tell it's gonna bring up stuff to talk about. Like, because it's 50 minutes in, we haven't gotten to our main topic yet. So here we go. So yeah,
Andor and Acolyte are kind of our two big things, aren't they?
yeah, they are. But let's go for a little bit into what was planned to be our main topic. Um, and then maybe we can say main topic part one, and then we can continue on next week. But we can go for a few minutes. Let's see what this goes. See how this goes, because Joel, you've prepared a bunch about this. So take it away. Talk about transitioning characters between different media, and what brought this up for you this week.
Well, this is something I've always thought about. As you know, Star Wars is supposed to be this multimedia project where characters can kind of hop from one media to the other, from comics to books to TV shows to movies, etc., etc., etc. But what interesting is I thought about is like, how do we use those characters? What responsibility should an author have over these characters? When should a character's arc end, or certain decisions be made in one media, and how that affects the other? Um, so I used a bunch of examples. So I have a bunch of examples here. Um, like for example, killing off a character. That's a big deal. Once you kill off a character, you can't use him ever again. At least unless you want to resurrect him.
Yeah,
Which
I was gonna
does
say,
happen.
wait a minute, it is Star Wars, Joel.
Oh, that's true. Um,
But I get your
but
point. Yeah.
But yeah, like we both Master and I were both on Doc Holocron's channel yesterday. I think he brought this up, and I think this is the kind of a good example of this. Is Asajj Ventress. She had seven really good, not seven, 6 really good seasons of Clone Wars, and then she dies in the book, and they haven't bothered to really resurrect her or anything again. So that kind of, I don't, like whether or not you like that decision or not, that's sort of like a kind of a sad state of affairs for Asajj Ventress. Like, you're the book that killed off this character for 6 seasons of Clone Wars. Um, and then you got other characters who died in different media where they began, like Saw, who, like his first appearance in live action movie was his death. And now we've kind of gotten a
That's true.
character who's sort of been jumping from back to forth into various media. And now we're about to get Kira, who, was kind of promised to be this big character on screen. And I mean, who knows what's gonna happen with her, but it's looking more and more like she's gonna not make it after Hidden Empire. I mean, if you go
Yeah.
against the Emperor and make it,
After
like,
the fall.
I know it ain't gonna be pretty. It's gonna
Yeah.
be beautiful, but it ain't gonna be pretty.
Mhm.
So I kind of asked myself, what are the kind of responsibilities of transitioning characters to media, and also media, but also tone of the media itself. The kind of keeping it consistent, but also kind of conforming to the story you're telling. Like, I kind of made a joke offhand once, maybe in private, because that's just me. But like, imagine you have Saw Gerrera, and you decide, let's put him in a canon story that's a Disney Junior thing, where we're gonna learn our ABCs. And here comes Saw Gerrera. He's not playing with the other rebels.
T for
Um,
terrorist.
I know, and then compared to Andor, where it's like you can have that more nuanced discussion about terrorism, Saw,
Yeah.
etc., etc., etc. So, and that's kind of the over extreme example
Sorry,
that I has
I'm
not
laughing
happened.
over myself. That
I
joke
know,
was not. That was too good for my own good.
I
Anyway,
know,
sorry.
I love it, I love it. So, Matthew, let's begin with
Yeah.
you. Like, where do you kind of see, I guess,
Mhm.
the responsibility of the author in terms of transitioning these characters? Because it's
Mhm.
like, and I want to make clear, I kind of like, I don't want to like say don't take a risk, but at the same time, it's like, if
Mhm.
you kind of do have somewhat of responsibility because you are part of this wider universe. Star Wars is not, you are not bigger than Star Wars.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't want to get too deep into like what gave Ryan Johnson the right to kill Luke Skywalker. I mean, he did it brilliantly. So,
Yeah.
I don't want to get too into that. But like, what kind of is that responsibility when you're
Mm.
transitioning from one character from one media to the other, and I guess even from one author to the other
Yeah.
as well?
I mean, go back to, well, when we're done this, go back to Doc's, go over to Doc's channel and we talk about this. If it leads to a good story, if it's a compelling story, um, and one, I mean, but here's the tricky thing: is in this sandbox, the story of the character is one that does arc from across media. And so you have the responsibility. This is the classic franchise thing: responsibility to tell a good story in the moment, the one you're writing, but also to tell a good character story that's consistent with consistent with and evolves the character beyond what we've gotten before. I mean, that's actually one of the weird things about Thrawn is, does he evolve? Does he change? Does he get challenged at all? And it's certainly not in the books. I mean, that's why Thalius and Arlani and Shiri even are more interesting. I have in the Ascendancy trilogy, why Vanto and Arlani again are more interesting in the kind of the origin story trilogy. But yeah, it's interesting you bring up Ventress, and I'll say this is one of those things of just subjective response. I I loved Dark Disciple. I did not experience it as a letdown. Um, in because I mean that's maybe more the way I mean that's the thing we've talked about for the last 11 months is I do tend to experience all these stories on a more equal level footing where a novel is I experience it as just as real as a screen story, and so that didn't feel much of a letdown to me. Also, no, I should admit I caught up on Clone Wars when it was on Netflix. I binged it, and then I binged again, and so I didn't live with this character for 6 years, and then expect for that character to get a good send off in on screen in Clone Wars. Um, but also bearing in mind, that these were Clone Wars episodes, as we all know. These were going to be, Katie Lucas wrote these scripts. They were going to be part of season 7 or 8 or whatever. But of course, the show got canceled. Said, okay, Christy Golden, here's Christy Golden, right? Here's make this a novel. Um, but I do think this is kind of case in point of the problem that you're addressing here is the fact that people do feel like it's a letdown just because they were going to make it what people wanted and expected. It probably would have been more universally beloved if it was on screen, but it wasn't. And at the time, that wasn't feasible. You bring up the Ahsoka point, and we've talked about this multiple times. Like I talked about on last Monday, just how now that she's continued to have this life on screen, in animation and in live action and just in the fandom, she is as popular as anyone whose last name happens to actually be Skywalker. She is a Skywalker. Let's not mince words there. And so, any kind of paper story can't be as significant as E.K. Johnston's novel was. And if it is as significant, it's going to be retconned and going to be fudged a little bit. So, all that to say, does a creative have the right to absolute or have the responsibility to absolute continuity? No. Does a creator have the right to absolutely obliterate the character? No. I mean, that's the thing with Rebels. Thrawn is still recognizable as Thrawn, even from the 90s novels, even if it's a different context and different type of story, but more similar. I mean, this is the point I made on Doc's channel is Thrawn and Rebels is way more similar to the 90s Thrawn because Thrawn in Rebels and Thrawn in the 90s is as the antagonist to hero rebel characters, whether it's the Ghost Crew or it's the big three from the original trilogy. Whereas in the Ascendancy trilogy and in the Thrawn Canon Thrawn trilogy, he's sort of the protagonist, sort of. I mean, it is weird. He's not as recognizable. He's more of this computer that the more interesting characters kind of plug into to find the answer to what to do, and it's kind of mixed. Again, I mean, for me, I've said this before. I said this in January, February. Thrawn in these novels is just marketing. It's actually Thalius and Aralani and whatnot. So there's a question there. I mean, I
Yeah.
think again, responsibility is tricky. You're
Well, let me let
responsible to
me
tell a
let
good
me.
story. I'll show it that way.
Yeah, I mean, but also the not just responsibility in the character, responsibility in the world. Like, you
Yeah.
know, you can make this kind of argument against Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Maybe J.J. Abrams wasn't that responsible. He sort of like decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Empire versus Rebels because that's what I like. So bye bye, New
Mhm.
Republic, kaboom! And then it's like, well, gonna bring back Palpatine and say Palpatine was alive for 30 years. Good luck figuring that one out, Filoni.
Right. Right.
You can say that kind of
Yeah.
irresponsible world building. I mean, I've argued
See,
they've
that's
managed
fascinating. I just want to say
to
it's
work
not
for.
as responsible. Just very quickly, it's not as responsible because it's too tied in. It doesn't evolve it. So you're saying they have the responsibility to evolve it too. Go ahead.
Evolve it, sure. I mean, if you, but also it's sort of like your decisions will affect other things moving forward, regardless. So, like, JJ brought Palpatine back and Rise of Skywalker. I honestly didn't have a problem with it, but I can see why. But now it's sort of like you kind of have to make your kind of pre Force Awakens stories
Mhm.
not necessarily always have to acknowledge it. Like, I don't think like every story has to acknowledge Palpatine secretly on Exegol the whole time. But it's sort of something you got to keep in the back of your head when you're making a
Mhm.
story like that and dealing with kind of bigger issues. Like now, Luke's stories are kind of have to deal with that. Shadow of the Sith dealt with it now because we kind of have
Mhm.
to.
Yeah.
Um,
Greg Puck's comic
exactly.
had to deal with it a little bit.
So sort of like Abrams sort of like just like here you go, and I'm out. Good luck figuring that one out,
Yeah.
folks. For the wider meta story as well. Also, you brought up something interesting about telling good character stories, obviously with these characters. Saw Gerrera, in my mind, is an interesting case of you see his evolution through every story he's in, from the
Mhm.
Onderon arc to Bad Batch to Jedi Fallen Order to Rebels to Andor. But the interesting thing about him is it's never Saul's story.
Mhm.
It's never the Saul Guerrera story. We're seeing Saul through other people's eyes. We're seeing the Bad Batch meet Saul. We're seeing Ahsoka deal with him. We're seeing Andor or Luthen deal with him.
Mhm.
We're seeing his evolution. We're seeing him go from monarchist to anarchist, I guess you could say, by the end. But he's always a secondary supporting character to someone else's role. And I think that's why him able to kind of leapfrog to various um
Mhm.
to various um corners of the medium has always worked better, at least for me, because I think it's not his story. It's never his story. He kind of just, I don't want to say like a display or like kind of like a background or
A foil.
decoration,
It's really a
foil of
foil.
decoration, but he's very much kind of serves a purpose. But
Mhm.
you see him evolve over time as well. So I think that's kind of been interesting. Saul's always kind of been more of an interesting case of like why is able to leapfrog, because it's never his. He's not the focus. He's sort
Mhm.
of either someone else's foil or kind of just there to show this is what's going on in the wider universe. He's kind of a link to
Mhm.
the wider rebellion.
Yeah, that's clearly way more successful. Not way more. It's clearly more successful than when a main character moves or switches. I mean, I'll say about Kira, what's working so well is she's kind of like that too. She's this thing in the center that all these other characters that we know and love, be they screen first or paper first. You got Luke and you got Vader, Luke and Leia, and you got Vader in the ongoing in the Vader comic. But you also have Afra uh, and Byler and Lasha and everyone in the other comics, in the Bounty Hunters and Afra comic. Um, you know, Kira, she's definitely maintained consistency with the Kira we see at the end of Solo, the one who is able to kill Dryden, who's able to then go be by Maul's side, and take over, ultimately take over. But yeah, I mean, there's still an evolution there of what her ultimate play is. We don't know, but yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think another character I'm going to steal from your notes here, Joel. Sorry. One other example
Go
is
ahead.
Maul never. Well, Maul gets his own a little bit of his own. He has his own comic, but that's also just his origins with Palpatine when he's a kid. He's a youngling Padawan. Then he has his moments, certainly in Clone Wars and in especially in the Siege of Mandalore. But yeah, he too is never fully his own main character. He's always a foil for Ahsoka and ultimately for Obi-Wan. I mean, the big arc is uh look what I've for Obi-Wan to be able to say, look what I've risen above. Um and so yeah, again, that's a great point. I will say one thing I did want to bring up, the example I wanted to bring up of, well, Ahsoka brings up this example of a creative really not owning a character, but really having primary custody, if you can use that, for a character. We know Dave Filoni, especially now that he can do whatever he wants with her. He can put her in any kind of story. He can make any story with her. So he was able to finish Clone Wars. He's able to have this live action series, and so again, bring back this point where E.K. Johnston had custody of her for a little bit, doesn't really anymore, or doesn't anymore. E.K. Johnston maybe has custody with Padme, and younger Sabe, whereas Greg Pak has older Sabe. That's just paper to paper. Another example I brought up, and I was going to bring this up, and I did bring this up with the Acolyte, kind of saying, why we won't probably see Keith Trennis on screen, why she won't have a major role. As much as I'd love that, I'd so love that to happen. She is the 19th fallen departed master. But we know that because of a story by Kevin Scott. And so there's anyone who has custody over Keith Trennis, it is Kevin Scott, who has her story mapped out. And that's the thing. He's thought through, he's taken the time to think through, why does she leave? Where does she end up? What's her journey? And so any other creative who wants to take her, or wants to use her, well, first of all, they're going to be part of the Luminous team. And so they're going to be in constant dialogue with Kevin about this. But ultimately, her story is going to, he's created the DNA. It's this weird thing. It's like kind of birthing a child, right? Like he's set up the DNA that her best story is going to be the one that he has set out for her, because he is a professional creative who's taking the time. So yeah, it's one of those things where again, similar with Filoni with Ahsoka, right? I mean, George said, here, Anakin has a Padawan, teenage girl, run with it, go for it. And he does, and it's the greatest TV character of all time. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Again, I wonder if responsibility may not be the word, but I mean, I like custody, as creative custody that does get respected in Lucasfilm. And so
It's an
yeah.
it's an interesting thing, because this is something I think a lot Star Wars has always had to deal with, really, since they started making expanded universe stuff out of Lucas. So like uh you know back in the day of old, 1990, you had the Thrawn trilogy, and Tim Zahn made Mara Jade and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
thing is, they let other authors write for Mara Jade. Although, from what I've been able to gather, just from what I've heard about, the Legends time, Tim Zahn wasn't particularly happy with letting people have custody over that character he made, and felt like, they didn't do a good job with it, and and there was definitely some back and forth kind of thing. And it's sort of interesting about, you know I think, Star Wars should be like comic books, a franchise where no one creative has custody over a character.
Mhm.
That's actually another reason why there was a little bit of kind of anger over the Ahsoka thing, is because,
Interesting.
I'm hang on, what's her name?
E.K.
A.K.
Johnston.
Johnston, a woman of LGBTQ background, and Dave Filoni, white guy, like, let someone else of
Yeah.
a different background write this character. Same with Tim Zahn, to be quite honest. Like, Tim Zahn is like kind of has always had this weird custody over Thrawn. It's only now
Sure.
that, as Rebels and the live action stuff, is Filoni kind of deciding, I'm going to take that character and
Mhm.
run with it. Like the only characters who really don't have this kind of thing are kind of all the ones George made, because George is not writing Star Wars anymore. So Luke,
Yeah.
Han, Leia, they're kind of going to whoever's writing it at the time. They're kind of
Mhm.
going to various different
They're
writers.
going to Charles Soule. Let's just put that in there. I'm kidding.
Yeah, Greg Pak, Charles Soule, all the other ones, books, that sort of thing. But it is kind of
Mhm.
interesting, not just transitioning between media, but also transitioning between authors and who has custody. Because you do look at like all of Filoni stuff. His characters have kind of all remained consistent. You got Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, Ezra, all the Rebels crew. Like they're still kind of there. It's why
Mhm.
I don't consider Ahsoka just yet like a kind of this in this sort of like they're bringing legacy characters with Bo-Katan and Ahsoka, although they're old enough. But it's like Jay Filoni's been kind of shepherding their path for years, and then
Yeah.
obviously with George, he didn't get to kind of finish Luke Han and Leia's. Well, he did. He just didn't get to continue it. Luke Han and
Right.
Leia's tale with 7, 8, 9, which is very much the Lucas story. That's kind of I don't want to we could expand it's even bigger, but we don't have all day of like the
Mhm.
Lucas story is 6 movies, and then 7, 8, 9 are two other guys' ideas for what the Lucas story could continue, and it would have been three. Um, so there would always been somewhat of that disconnect anyway.
Mhm.
Um, and it's an interesting discussion. And I mean, I'm someone who very much advocates know that it's all fair game. Dave Filoni has as much right to write Thrawn as Charles Soule does, and Charles Soule
Mhm.
and Claudia Gray should be able to write an Ahsoka book as much as Dave Filoni does. And I know people do get kind of upset that Filoni's so gardening
Mhm.
his characters almost too much, that he kind of not allowing other voices to take over the
Yeah.
character. Because there have been plenty of examples of the original creator, newer voices doing even more interesting things
Mhm.
with the creative, like
Oh yeah.
Ryan Johnson with Luke Skywalker, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
And with Ray and with everyone.
exactly. So I do think certain. And I mean, I don't want to get too much in, but it will be curious to see those characters kind of move Ray, Finn, and Poe in particular,
Mhm.
because they don't really have a single custody creator. Like, JG didn't want to take that role.
Right.
Ryan didn't take that role because he was only there for one time. And they kind of don't have a Lucas or Filoni who's kind of always written them.
Mhm.
Um, then obviously we got Kenobi with the Kenobi series that Kenobi was written by a different person and
Right.
directed.
I mean, and this speaks to in part, what you speak to about where you want folks other than Favreau and Filoni involved in Star Wars. We want Leslie Headland to give her take on whatever this era is called, High Republic, whatever. We want you know, let's get more R2D2 C3PO stories. Sure, nobody has custody over them. Luke on Leia again, yeah, like you said, with Lucas finished that story. That's why they're supporting characters in the sequel trilogy, right? It's 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 Ray Finn Poe story. I will say though, and this gets to my point about the responsibility to tell a good story. I you'll disagree with this, but whatever. Um, that's fair. I think everything we know and love about Ray comes from the Last Jedi, primarily. Not everything. That's not fair, but at least the details. Sure, the facts that of her being orphaned on Jakku and all that. Yeah, that comes from the JJ films, but how she feels about it, how she experiences the world, how she moves through and transcends it. That is the Last Jedi, and so I'll say Ryan Johnson did a better job with with those characters, without character at least, than than J.J. Abrams did. I will say, I mean, the contrast between say Ahsoka and Keith Trennis is, Ahsoka is that big, right? Is such a galaxy spanning character, a fandom spanning character, that there are so many pockets and so many profitable pockets and so many possibilities, parts of her story that you can tell. But yeah, it would be interesting to see different creatives have an input in her character and in her story. And I think with the Ahsoka show, there will be more. But
Well, still Dave writing all the
yeah,
episodes.
okay, fair enough. But he's writing it. But I mean,
Mhm.
there can be directors and other folks. But yeah, it'll be good to see her get more angles and more twists. Things that Dave won't then retcon. Because again, that's the thing. The novel is more detailed and has more to do. And so that was part of the disappointment. Keeve Trennis, she's just a paper character, not just she's only this paper character in these few books in the High Republic, and so that's easier for Kevin Scott to have custody, if you will. I will say, great example of a character who hasn't transcended media but has transcended creatives is Afra. Afra's living her best life right now, and at least the comic is. The story is she is not. She's being taken over by the Spark Eternal, which is bringing everything home that Kieran Gillen laid out in the Darth Vader comic from 2015, but that Alyssa Wong has really picked up, and Ming-Q Jung with the art has really carried the ball really strongly. There was also the audio play that I have mixed feelings about, but it's pretty fun, and it does mark a transition moment. But yeah, I mean, Afra is a great example of, I mean, someone who LGBTQ woman who with kind of Asian coded Asian skin, and heritage. Yeah, that Ming-Q Jung is more at home writing. Kieran Gillen is a white man. So
Yeah.
there's that aspect too. Is can the creators demographic make for a better story? And I mean, we often say yes, at least when the creative can attend to the representational issues and the layers there. So maybe that's part of that responsibility.
Yeah, and back to kind of the transitioning between creative custody, I've always sort of wondered, like, what kind of create the characters going to these different tonal shows and these different,
Mhm.
like, we joked about this. I think did we joke about this on Ion Can? Did we joke about this on Doc Channel? I think it was Doc Channel where we said, "Imagine if the person Mon Mothma was going to talk to was Jar Jar Binks." But sort of like, yeah, imagine if Jar
It's
Jar
so
Binks was
good.
an Andor written by one of Tony Gilroy's writers or Tony
Mhm.
Gilroy himself, and Tony Gilroy was like, "I'm just going to write this character, it's Jar Jar Binks." Like, kind of imagine
Yeah.
that kind of like juxtaposition of like, here's a no, the play 100% straight. This isn't like a joke. It's like, no,
Yeah.
just here's Jar Jar Binks in Andor. It's same tone, same writing quality. It's
Yeah.
just Jar Jar Binks, and it's
I
sort of
don't know
like,
if that would work, but
I don't know either, but I kind of like that's kind of the kind of thing I think be fascinating to just kind of see. It's like, can you
Mhm.
take Jar Jar Binks and put him in something like Andor? I would have loved to
Yeah.
see Tony Gilroy and that kind of crew write Count Dooku, because I think imagine kind of that kind of geopolitical story
Mhm.
with Andor style writing and tone.
Yeah. They'd have to
And
lean
then
into the vampire there, I think.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Um, But I
Yeah.
guess one final point, because this
Mhm.
is definitely something you brought up, is obviously you see all the media as equal. Um, but I
Or
do know there
more
are,
connected, yeah.
in terms of like for your own personal view, but there are people who are very much, for multiple reasons, some of which I don't want to get into too much of, like, well, if Ahsoka's story wraps up in Ahsoka or the Mandalorian in
Mhm.
live action, I feel like there will be people crying foul because it's like Ahsoka started out as an animated character, and you're not going to finish her story in animation. Some people would
Mhm.
argue, I don't know, they feel cheated. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of why, but I do think there is some validity to that. To that
Yeah.
kind of, you start an animation, yet should end the character animation. At least with
Mhm.
Ahsoka, with a little bit of wiggle room, obviously. 'Cause I didn't have a problem with Saw. I didn't have a problem with Maul. I just had more of a problem with Ventress, but I always felt Ventress should have lived to see more adventures, because I feel like her
Mhm.
story is so interesting. But it's more like I just felt like there was more to that character that could have been told. Unless that she died
Yeah.
in a book. So
Yeah, that's an
there is.
interesting question. So I'll go for it.
I was gonna say, yeah, there are people out there like it'd be weird if Ahsoka's
Mhm.
journey it started in animation, didn't kind
Mhm.
of end officially in animation.
I mean, what makes the thing with Saul a lot easier is we have he shows up in a Clone Wars arc. We think he's done.
Mhm.
We don't even I don't even remember him in the Clone. Well, I guess maybe I do a little bit, but then he shows up in this movie, this film, and then he dies. So it's a lot shorter. With Ahsoka, it's far more important that I'm not worried about the animation versus live action. It is far more important that if her story is going to end, that it ends in an Ahsoka story. It can't be.
Mhm.
She has to be the main character. I mean, that's because that's the thing with Clone Wars is she became the main character of that show, and Rex and Anakin Obi Wan a little bit, but primarily Ahsoka, and so yeah, I mean, I don't think she's gonna. I don't think her story is gonna end. I kind of want to see some weird sort of force apotheosis thing happening with her where she never dies because I think that would be. I think there's just something about her kind of goddess level. I'm channeling. Well, I forget what they're called.
The
The
ones.
podcaster. No, there's a podcaster out in Calgary area who does a lot of uh, goddess mythology parallels with Star Wars. Anyway, uh, but that would still be sort of a type of ending for her story, kind of like Elijah being taken up into, the assumption of Ahsoka. I don't know, getting
I mean,
sacrilegious here,
I go
but
with the Lord of the Rings metaphor,
yeah,
like Gandalf. She's just gonna go to
yeah,
Valinor, go to
something like
Mortis.
that.
My
Yeah,
my
something like
task is
that. Not
done.
not a bloody gruesome death or a sad death, but just a you know, but still maybe having some influence. I don't know somehow. Anyways, it would have to be her story. It has to be it has to be the main focus in the main event. Otherwise, it would take away from both Ahsoka and from whoever that other character is. And so, yeah, I mean that's the thing. I think in Clone Wars, I wonder. I mean, I'd like to ask Filoni and George this: did they set out to make Obi Wan and Anakin to be the main characters, and Ahsoka just ended up happening to be because, or, I mean, Ashley Eckstein just did such a great job. She was also the self-insert character for teenage kids watching this show, younger kids watching this show, um, and it takes the time to just explore her experience of the galaxy, such that by the Siege of Mandalore, uh, it's Order 66 from her perspective and from Rex's.
I
Um,
don't know. I
you know,
always felt they were always intended to make her the main character since the movie, and they just kind of
yeah,
put Obi Wan and Anakin in the posters because it's easy to
because it
sell
does
those
sell.
two.
Yeah,
Right?
fair
It's easy
enough.
to,
So that makes
um,
that kind of proves my point. Is Ahsoka is a live action show about Ahsoka. Clone Wars is an animated show about Ahsoka. Um, that's the more important thing.
then you got Rebels, which is in this weird. It's not
Yeah,
about Ahsoka, but it continues her story anyway.
yeah, it does, and it transitions it. But you notice how there was this. I mean, the Ahsoka lives question mark, and there's all this energy around. Oh, this can't be it because it isn't her story. So that kind of case in point. I rest my case.
Yeah. I'll be very curious to see if the Ahsoka series, how that ends in terms of does it go one season and if, like then does Ahsoka just kind of go back to Mandoverse proper for the big crossover or not? I mean, who knows? That's far off. Although I think we might get Ahsoka next year, so it's not as far off as you're going to think.
Speaking of space wizards,
But let me check my notes.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, last one. I mean, I brought up Maul. We already brought up Maul, kind of as sort of the odd kind of the first one to really get his universe expanded.
true.
And if you're like me, who kind of sees there's somewhat of a difference between the various mediums, like I never felt like I was missing anything if I never saw a Maul episode of Clone Wars and I watched the saga. Like Maul served his purpose in episode one,
Mm,
and then he kind of doesn't need to serve his purpose again. Like it's cool to see how Kenobi,
mhm,
learns about the gets to be the guy we know in episode four. But again, it's not Kenobi's story.
true.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's Anakin's story and Luke's story and
Mhm.
Leia's story. Kenobi just kind of I've seen some things and I'm gonna help you guys out. I might have had to face this horned guy once, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, unless you
no,
saw Solo,
that's true.
you know, that would
That's a
give you
whole
some.
other. That's
But
a
then
whole
you'd
other
be
can.
missing out on the greatness that is Clone Wars, and that is the Siege of Mandalore arc,
Yeah, and
right?
that's why.
No, well, here's the thing: is Maul has an influence in who Ahsoka becomes too.
That's true. So,
But I mean, how much the Ahsoka show is going to connect with Maul, I don't know. But anyway,
and that's why also, I put in my notes, I jokingly made Kira a demotion because it's like she was set up to be this great screen
yeah.
character, and it's like, oh no, not a lot of people are not gonna watch it, but
Again, they
but
learned the wrong lesson from that box office mediocre box office, but that's a whole other
I mean, I didn't like
conversation.
Solo that much either, yeah, regardless of the box office. I didn't think it
That,
was
that
that good a film, but
that's a whole other conversation. The lesson they should have learned was take another 6 months to get it better. But anyway,
I mean, I still think Solo would have probably not been as big. I don't think it was
possible.
that good a film. But
Anyway, Charles Soule is writing a bang up comic crossover
oh
event.
yeah, I can't wait. So
Put it that
we
way.
win. We won either way. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I've covered all I wanted to cover with this topic. I think we did good. Canon saved. Canon saved. I do think the bigger discussion later maybe to be had about um how author responsibility in a
Yeah.
multimedia franchise and kind of
Mhm.
creative decisions that do have long-term implications. And I could go into the whole thing about world between worlds, and if there's always a
Mhm.
chance some author does use it the wrong way, and we're gonna get then that could cause a whole kerfuffle. But we don't have much time for that, so we'll
Yeah.
save that for another week.
Oh yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean, these are definitely continuity questions, and the continuity is a thing we like to talk about here. We like to go back and forth about. I go back and forth in my own head about um, how much it matters. Does it matter? It matters in my heart, but not necessarily in my head, or both. I don't know. Anyways, Joel, this has been great. Thanks, and yeah, and the comments on the bottom have been great. Great discussion as always. These EOC deep dives and talking about the Acolyte and talking about Andor and talking about Saw Gerrera and it's conversations overall. Again, I think we all need to do a better job listening.
vote,
But
vote
yes,
tonight, people.
tomorrow, if you're American, please vote. Yes. Anyways, that is a good point to wrap things up. Again, thank you everyone for joining us on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter. Um, Lots of great comments in the chat. If you heard something you like what you thought, you hated what you thought, hated what you heard, whatever, put in the comments below as well. Give this video a like and a share. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at GID 2021. Again, GID 2021. I had a lot of fun talking to Kachik. I think that's how you pronounce
Yeah.
their at bland username one. If you're listening to our podcast, please let us know. We want to subscribe and listen. Maybe I'll send you the link later.
Yeah.
But yeah. You can find me again at JID 2021.
You can find me on Twitter at NEUG45. Talk a bit about Star Wars, a little bit about soccer, a bit about Star Trek, a bit about stuff. Going to be a lot about the World Cup coming up, just full disclosure. On Instagram at MNEUG1138. You can also some soccer, some Star Wars stuff going on there. Some action figure stuff at Ion Canon Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow the guy at Ion Canon. He's great. Greg is great. But at Ion Canon Pod, Twitter and Instagram, I will put up the photos of the Republic gunship that I am so glad to have finished making. Again, yes, really beautiful Lego. Way too expensive, but it was a good purchase. Anyway, also follow the flagship Twitter and Instagram at the SWU. They got lots of great content out there as well. Ben putting up lots of great banners and images and plugs for all the different shows going on the network. So give them a look. Yeah, and every Monday or Tuesday I'll get the audio episodes up here on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Of course, Tractor Beam every Thursday or Friday on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Okay, I gotta go to bed, but I'm not too sure. We'll figure out what we're talking about next week. See what comes up. Maybe continuing this discussion. I don't quite know, but for now, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.